Crime and Punishment has always been a source of entertainment, and look no further than the Victorian era for some of history's craziest crimes. From trials that created laws to prolific serial killers and more, we've got it all. The Tichborne case was a doozy of a case that captivated Victorian England in the 1860s and 70s. Roger Tichborne, heir to the family's titles and fortunes, was presumed to have died in a shipwreck in 1854 at the age of just 25. His mother clung to a belief that he might have survived, and after hearing rumors that he had made his way to Australia, she advertised extensively in Australian newspapers, offering a reward for information. Well, in 1866, a butcher known as Thomas Castro came forward claiming to be Roger. Although his manners and bearing were unrefined, he gathered support and traveled to England. He was instantly accepted by Lady Tichborne as her son, although other family members were like, "You're an imposter." During protracted inquiries before the case went to court in 1871, details emerged suggesting that the claimant might be Arthur Orton, a butcher's son who had gone to sea as a boy and had last been heard of in Australia. After a civil court had rejected the claimant's case, he was charged with perjury. While awaiting trial, he campaigned throughout the country to gain popular support. In 1874, a criminal court jury decided he was not Roger and declared him to be Arthur, and eventually, years later, he confessed to being Arthur. Mary Ann Cotton is one of England's most prolific serial killers, and she had a talent for collecting insurance money. She lost 3 husbands, a lover, a friend, her mother, and a dozen offspring, all of whom died of stomach fever. Even though mortality rates were high at the time, the number of family members who died while under her care became cause for concern, and a local government official called for the exhuming of her latest step offspring's body. The boy was examined and they found arsenic in his stomach. So Cotton was tried for the killing of Charles Cotton and went the way of the rope necklace. However, her botched killing would continue to earn her fame for years to come. Instead of what you would expect to be a quick end, she languished at the end of the rope for several minutes before expiring. She earned the distinction of England's first female serial killer and even had her own nursery rhyme. Of all the Victorian killers, Amelia Dyer is one of the most prolific, but she isn't widely spoken about. Y'all know what Cabbage Patch dolls look like, right? Okay, that's gonna sub in for Descendants in today's story. Dyer resided in Reading and after being widowed, took to cabbage patch farming to sustain an income. It involved taking in unwanted and illegitimate descendants for a fee. Most farmers would neglect the unwanted to the point they died, at which point they would restart the process and receive a fee for a new one. Initially, this is what Amelia did, but in a bid to maximize her profits, she resorted to faster killings in the form of hands around the neck. After some time, a physician became kind of weary of the number of unwanted that were dying under Amelia's care and involved the authorities. She was convicted of neglect and sentenced to 6 months of hard labor. When she left prison, she returned to farming, but moved from area to area and assumed various identities so nobody could track her. She also stopped seeing physicians and resorted to putting bodies in the Thames, the big river. Well, one day a body washed up on the shores and there was white tape wrapped around the neck. The police were able to trace it back to Dyer and raided her house. Over time, several more bodies with that white tape were found in the river. At her trial at the Old Bailey in March of 1896, she claimed insanity, but she was convicted of killing, albeit just 1 count. Given the 30-year period that she was a farmer, it's estimated she killed between 300 to 400 humans. She went the way of the rope necklace herself on June 10th of 1896. William Palmer was convicted of killing by poison in one of the most famous cases of the 1800s. After completing his medical training, which was constantly affected by nefarious activities, he returned to his hometown to open a medical practice. Shortly after his wedding and birth of his first descendant, a number of individuals surrounding Dr. Palmer died, often in his presence. These included his next 4 offspring, his mother-in-law, individuals to whom he owed money, his wife, his brother, his uncle, and several of his illegitimate descendants. The death of his brother was investigated, but Palmer's involvement couldn't be proven. He only found himself in trouble after the suspicious death of a gambling buddy who fell ill after dining with him. After a post-mortem revealed that the man had been poisoned, Palmer was arrested, tried, and convicted, largely on circumstantial evidence. He was then dubbed Palmer the Poisoner and killed in front of a 30,000-member crowd in June of 1856. His trial made headlines because it was the first to be moved away from an outlying jurisdiction because of fears that he would not receive a fair trial. Dr. Neil Cream is another notable Victorian killer and would become known for botched surgeries and liberal use of poison. He was a suspect in a number of killings, but he always managed to escape conviction until his lover turned on him for the death of her husband. He served several years in prison but was released early, likely due to bribery. He then returned to London, where he'd been enrolled in graduate studies years earlier. He eventually settled in Lambeth and promptly killed 4 ladies of the night with strychnine. He was arrested due to his own arrogant and stupid actions, tried, and convicted as the poisoner. He met his death soon afterwards. Marie Manning had come to London from Switzerland in the 1840s and quickly met one Patrick O'Connor, a moneylender who had amassed a tidy fortune and earned himself quite the reputation as a hard man in the docks area. The pair became lovers. Marie then met a pub landlord by the name of Frederick George Manning, so she married him, took his name, but kept the first as a lover. Having developed a taste for finer things in life through her work with the upper classes, Mary looked for a get-rich-quick scheme, so she came up with the plan to kill O'Connor and run away with his riches. So one evening, she invited him over for dinner, setting a trap. Before they dined, she's like, hey, you might want to just wash your hands. And as he did, she took out a pistol and fired at him, point blank in the head. Didn't work, so Manning, who was in on the plan, fetched an iron bar and caved his head in. The couple then tossed the body into a pre-dug grave under their kitchen floor and covered that up with heavy stones. And over the next couple of days, Marie went to O'Connor's home and started taking his share certificates, cash, and even his furniture. Soon, his buddies got kind of suspicious and notified the police. The day after they notified the police, the constables came around and noticed liquid coming out of the kitchen floor. Well, Marie's kitchen floor. They lifted the stones and found the body. And it didn't take long for the culprits to be apprehended. They were brought before a judge at the Old Bailey, and after a trial that lasted 2 days, found guilty and condemned to death. According to newspaper reports at the time, Marie tried to rope necklace one of her female guards while awaiting execution. Charles Dickens estimated that as many as 50,000 people came to watch the eventual end of life. Manning dropped first, and then Marie. In January of 1879, the 55-year-old Julia Martha Thomas wanted to employ a new housekeeper. Kate Webster applied for the position. Thomas gave her the job, not knowing she had a criminal history. Almost from day one, the relationship between the two women was not it. Thomas felt her new servant was lacking the necessary domestic skills, and she frequently criticized Webster's cleaning and cooking. Within days, Thomas gave Webster her notice. The final day of the working arrangement was a Sunday. When Thomas returned home from church, those two got into quite the argument. According to Webster's own account, in a fit of rage, she pushed her employer down the stairs. Thomas started screaming, and determined to shut her up, Webster killed her to cover up the crime. What did she do? Well, she cut the body, boiling a lot of it in copper pots. Webster posed as Thomas for several days, but soon the neighbors got kind of suspicious. Webster then fled to Ireland, and when police came to the cottage to investigate, they found the red stains in the remains of the bones in the hearth. They also found a letter addressed to Webster, and that gave them prime suspect. Before long, she was apprehended and sent back to stand trial in London. For 6 days, the court heard about all of her wickedness. A jury of her peers found her guilty, and days before she was due to die, she confessed. Elizabeth Eliza Fenning entered the employment of Robert Turner and his wife Charlotte in early 1815. On the night of the 21st of March, she prepared a dinner of beef and dumplings for the family. Just before she finished cooking, Robert came into the kitchen and ordered her not to leave the room until the meal was finished. Strange, but she complied. Well, dinner was served, and the family tucked in, with 2 of the Roberts' apprentices and a housemaid. Shortly afterwards, everybody at the table collapsed onto the floor. The police arrived to find Eliza curled up on the stairs in crippling pain, and everybody else was in a bad state. Foul play was suspected for the sudden sickness that had torn through the house, and the line of suspicion led straight to Eliza. To make matters worse, witnesses came forward claiming that Eliza hated her employers, who had recently threatened to fire her after some naughtiness. Within several days, everybody who had eaten the potentially poisoned food started to get better. Still, Eliza was arrested and quickly put on trial for attempted killing. It was eventually pointed out that it would not have been possible for her to have mixed the arsenic, which was the suspected ickiness, into the food. You've also got witnesses coming forward alleging that Robert Turner had a history of violent and really bad outbursts, but this didn't help Eliza. She was found guilty. The public rallied to her side, campaigned against the courts, but it didn't help. Eliza met her end on July 26th. Now, the misuse of forensic in this entire trial was held up as a prime example of legal misconduct, and several medical societies put in place measures that anybody studying for a license with them had to take a 3-month course in legal medicine to ensure what happened here would never happen again. Christina Edmonds was popularly known as the chocolate cream killer and carried out a series of poisonings in Brighton during the early 1870s. So she would buy chocolates from a local shop and lace them with strychnine before returning them to be sold to unsuspecting members of the public. All of this resulted in several people becoming seriously ill and at least 30 deaths. Eventually, she was sentenced to death. Although she did attempt to avoid this end of life by faking a pregnancy, the rows was quickly discovered. Then she underwent a full psychiatric evaluation and her sentence was remitted, and she was moved into an institution. This move resulted in public outcry, with a lot of folks seeing it as a clear sign of class privilege and massive miscarriage of justice. And finally for today, William Burke and William Hare were 2 Irish immigrants who became the most famous body snatchers in history. They quickly learned that there was quite the demand for cadavers, and there was a lot of easy money to be made in providing them. They would ultimately kill at least 17 victims. Interestingly enough, Burke was the only one who met his end of life due to a sentence. Hare testified against him and was granted immunity. Burke was publicly dissected post-mortem before his skin was used to make a book, which is housed in the Police Museum on the Royal Mile. These deaths, and others like them, resulted in the 1832 Anatomy Act, which changed the laws regarding dissections and the procuring of bodies in order to combat the lucrative trade in cadavers in the UK. Alrighty folks, that's it for me once again. I've been Alexa, your resident emo girly. See y'all next time I buzz in over here at Bumblebee.